Benvenuti a GiovedìScienza.
Welcome to GiovedìScienza Science on a Thursday. And this evening we have our guest, Vittorino Andreoli and Piero Bianucci.
Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening to you all. And welcome to those who are listening in the streaming version, but those who will listen to us, because, for example, we've had over 100,000 people who listen to us ex post afterwards, so an enormous virtual theatre. Vittorino Andreoli, you all know him, but possibly not all know that he is a surveyor. Yes. Yes, he's a land surveyor. And after he sat his test on July the 2nd, I won't say the year, a few months later, he also sat his A-levels, and therefore he was able to enroll in the Faculty of Medicine, which he couldn't do as a surveyor, because this had been a long time dream of his, and while studying as a surveyor he'd also studied Latin and maths, and he wanted to be a psychiatrist, which is what he did. So he was very clear about what his future had. Once he graduated, first of all he worked as a researcher, and he worked in fundamental science and research with an eye looking for a summary or a crossroads of different sciences. I've had the opportunity to meet him both, in fact, privately for dinner and also here, and we spoke about serotonin, for instance, which is the mediator that he studied, because he is one of those Italians who left Italy to study what was a little more difficult to do here, but then he came back. And so shall we say that he is the opposite of a brain drain? He's a brain come back to Italy. And Vittorino Andreoli was saying, yes, I studied land surveyors, but studied land surveying, in fact, but then I discovered that I wanted to study mad people. Here, there are two mad people sitting next to him, but in his life he has had many mad people. Vittorino Andreoli is also an author. Well, first of all, he's been awarded a number of prizes. There are so many that I won't list them. And he's also written a large number of books, which I think is worth reading, and the latest is Homo, stupidus to stupidus. The subtitle is The Agony of a Civilization, which is the title that we used for this evening's conference. Now, this is not very optimistic, is it? Well, the title isn't, but there's a lot of active pessimism. And I'd like to say something which is a bit part of his autobiography. Maybe there is a new Vittorino Andreoli, because this book is a book that, unless you knew the history of the person, you would say this is a book by an anthropologist, but an anthropologist who is versed in all other disciplines as well as anthropology. It is a crossroads, a vision of human beings. I don't know if you agree. Do you feel that you're an anthropologist, a bit of one? Well, first of all, allow me to welcome this extraordinary audience, and thank you for being here. You see, a psychiatrist normally deals with one person at a time. You relate to one person at a time. And I must say that a person is a world. Human beings are extraordinary. Man is extraordinary, and I say that they are extraordinary even when behavior is socially unacceptable. But sometimes you feel the need to put together more people, more knowledge, which comes from single individuals. There is a need to be in a situation where, rather being with a single person, you want to be with human beings with a capital H, which is why sometimes I'm attracted by the fact that, by wondering how the group, the community is developing, not just the individual. But I have also said, and I have in fact debated the fact in the past, that psychiatry is part of anthropology. When you talk about a mad person, and I feel very strongly for mad people, sometimes people refer to it as if mad people were quasi-people. Lombroso thought that too.
Lombroso, che era,
Lombroso
lo ricordo qui a Torino, ma
is here to Turin, but I would like to remind you that he originally came from Verona, where I come from. He came from Verona, then went to Pavia, and then came to Turin. And Turin is a very welcoming, wonderful city.
Torino è una città
accogliente,
meravigliosa.
Gli abbiamo dedicato anche un
No, ma appunto lui diceva.
He used to say, Lombroso that is, that mad people, and he generally associated mad people, them to criminals. He said he was the mad person was a degenerated person, as if they had stopped in the evolutionary tree at a notch which was slightly below the one of Homo sapiens. And this was one of the big mistakes that Lombroso made. Historically, a very interesting character, but with today's eyes, it's different with hindsight. So, but when we look at a mad person, we know that we're looking at a human being, because madness is a form of suffering. In fact, it's suffering. It's suffering. It's the suffering of existence, of existing. It's part of humanism, and when I think of mad people, I feel authorized to seek common denominators, because it is human beings that I am studying. To say that mad people are human beings is what it is. In fact, sometimes they are the peak of humanity. And I think that this is setting the story right. It is, but think of humanism in depression. Think, depression. 14% of the Italian population suffers from depression, clinically diagnosed depression, not the fact that you're sad one day or that you have a bit of, if something has happened to you and you're sad or you're in mourning. No, clinically diagnosed depression. And this type of problem is based, I will say it very rapidly, it is based on two pillars. The first one is the perception of the fact that you are powerless, and that they're unable to do things, even the things that they did before. And this is very first pillar. But the second one is feeling guilty because you don't know what you're unable to do, what you feel is demanded of you. Well, in this depression, there is a human conflict between the need to be useful to others and the fear not to be able to. It's the relationship between an individual and society, yes, because you see, human beings, we always talk about me, 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 me. Can't stand the word anymore. You know that the psychology of the individual was born with Freud, and that's you got the idea that if we wanted to act to solve some conflicts, anxiety, depression, and others, you had to analyze the inside of the human being. You have a human being, and by analyzing it, or him or her, you can solve the problem. But things have changed. We need us, because the hallmark of human beings is that one human being needs another human being, be it man or woman. We live through relationships, in relationships. This is the important hallmark. That is to say that we are characterized by a relationship. If we appreciated, if only we appreciated the beauty of being bound to others, to do things for others and not for me, we would discover a degree of humanity within us. And even in the, in quotes, broken people, the great mad men and women that are my patients. There is a very beautiful image in this book. It's towards the end. My pen, it says, is a bit like a seismograph, says Andreoli. That is to say, my pen. Well, first of all, I'm wondering whether he writes by hand or by computer. But let us presume that he writes by hand. But it's a very beautiful metaphor, because you feel the malaise of the world. Is that it? You react to it? Yes, because I don't know why I decided to become a psychiatrist and no longer following in my father's footsteps. But I'm fascinated by human beings, the human beings that find living very hard. I'm attracted, can I say so frankly? I'm fascinated by mad people, and the very few normal people I know are very boring. Unfortunately, well, fortunately, there are very few normal people. There are very few of us. We're very few of us. So, nowadays, at long last, we've understood that mental suffering is very widespread. Maybe there is, well, for example, anxiety and depression, 14%. Anxiety, many more. The crisis, the relational crisis. Parents and children, the couple. Human beings are defined by their relationships. We have learned and we have to understand that our mental well-being depends on others.
Ma allora, allargando lo sguardo, appunto,
Looking at the world and society, civilization, what does your pen tell us? I was hoping that some of you would say, well, I hope that the seismograph are broken. Well, we know that doctors have very bad handwriting, but I'm worried. This book was written because I'm greatly concerned. And I must say that I'm fascinated by the path that Homo has taken, but although we're starting from afar because we separated from the Australopithecus, and since then several million years have gone by. But we have two sapiens. A first sapiens, because we were doing extraordinary things, because Homo habilis, then Homo erectus. Think of what you can do standing on 2 legs rather than 4. And then the skills that we developed. But then we know how to solve problems. That is to say, we changed the way we adapt because it was no longer responding, answering to conditions, but you could change the conditions. So I must say that, in fact, we managed to establish a relationship between human beings that are part of nature and nature, because you can modify, you can change. So we were worthy of sapiens. And it is a curious thing because sapiens means wise. It's wisdom. How can you be twice wise? So sapiens. So it was an extra gift bestowed upon us. But when we look at the present time, because I'm always here with my mad people, my mad patients, and I live here and now. They call me the psychiatrist of extreme cases, but seeing human beings now, not looking at them individually, but as a community, I must say that that idea, when I say this is sapiens, I get a reaction. We made a mistake. I think it was a misnomer. Why? And I confess it. I feel that human beings are stupidus, and we go back to the title rather than sapiens. But there is a reason why. I only know how to do what I do, that is to say, I work with patients who are sick, and it's this relationship, this individual relationship is extraordinary, because I can tell you that a human being can change from one day to the next, because it's very little is enough. Sometimes a meeting with someone, or I don't want to be trivial, but even smile sometimes means that you're looking that person in a different way, with empathy. So it is possible to change, and this gives me great trust in the future, because I'm a pessimist, but I'm an active pessimist. I see lots of difficulties, but then I try to overcome them. The optimist, waiting for the solution to fall upon them, well, that optimist doesn't do anything, really. Best to be actively pessimistic. In any case, that said, when we start to look at it as a whole, I'm afraid. I'm really concerned. Why? Because the first symptom that we see is what we call destructiveness. Destructiveness is a form of violence, because it hurts things, it destroys them. But say I'm going to take revenge, or I'm going to try to get something from someone else, or I will hurt someone for my advantage. Well, at least that has an aim, while pure destructiveness is what we see today. That is to see, where the situation whereby we hurt others, but we're also hurting ourselves, not only because you can kill and then commit suicide, and that's the example, but, for instance, think of youngsters, the so-called baby gangs. I don't particularly like that definition, but what are baby gangs? They take someone whom they know, beat them up and steal maybe €5. So the action is not justified by, say, the amount of money. You wouldn't go to a youngster, beat them up for €5, just like you wouldn't go to an older person who's gone to pick up their pension. So, and then they act in a group and then they're discovered immediately. They say, I'm doing this, but the bad actions turn up against me and they pay for them. There's no jail for if you're a juvenile below a certain age, but you end up in an institution. So if we look at our history, we have witnessed the destruction of museums, of the destruction of works of art. But this is our history, this is humanity. It concerns the people who lived before us. So what's the meaning of destroying a statue, a Syrian statue? And then destroying something that talks about the ancient civilizations in Mesopotamia. There's this drive, this destructive drive. We have a sort of pulsion of violence. We no longer call it violence. We call it destructiveness. We're not interested in anything. We destroy things. And here, talking about destructiveness, which is discussed in about a third of this book, you also talk about the need to have an enemy. Is this the essence of destructiveness? Yes, because identity is currently defined on the basis of an opposite. So, if that is my enemy, and that enemy means that I have an identity because I do the opposite. And sometimes, if I don't have an enemy, I create one. So this is consistent with the rest of it, with relationships. Yes, it is but it's an anomalous relationship. It is a relationship that, if you'll allow me, I will have to define with an ancient term, but it applies now to the present day. It's the appeal, it's being fascinated by evil. You know that I talk about youngsters because I'm particularly interested in youngsters because I think that they could behave in a different way. They know that they could behave in a different way. They know that they don't have to beat the other person up. They know that their fathers and mothers have told them not to do it, but they're fascinated. They are mesmerized by evil. They become heroes in their own eyes. They're doing something extraordinary. But adults are not much better. Yes, you're quite right to say that. I love young people, but adults are like that too. I am not involved in general matters, but in some of the Asian countries, for instance, the government of this country is made up of juxtaposition. It's a government in Asia. What do? They say, because you said A, I will do non-A. I will do the opposite. The question is never what is best to do. I must always do the opposite. This is a form of pathology, and it is what I believe is the greatest social illness, power. I'm talking about that country. I don't know about anything about this person. And here we are in Turin, but power, to power as a verb too. I can and therefore I do. It's not I can and therefore I can be useful. No, I will do it. I will do because I can, and I can because I do. And this means that there is not even the idea of doing something in service of human beings, but for me, for my group, for parties, and that group dominates. Yes, we have heard this being mentioned, but it's only Asian, of course. Now, Far Eastern, are we joking? It's everyone, because they're destroying everything. Why? If a community needs something, you must decide whether you're going to help them or not. But I can't say, what would you like to do? Let's do it my way. If you'll allow me to say it, these people should not be called Homo sapiens sapiens, not even once. We will have to revoke it, but everything is fine. You make a distinction between evil and a mistake. A mistake is something which is inherent, probably necessary to human beings, while evil is something we could do without. Yes, a mistake is mostly linked to the fact that you are trying to find solutions, maybe not the truth, but at least a solution, a little like science. You're two scientists, but you want to reach a conclusion. Well, at least the fact that it can be tested, verified. Now, the mistake is compatible with truth, that is, or with the quest of truth. We followed this route, and we saw that it is not, say, this one, but it's you have to turn left or right or center, and you learn from mistakes. Yes, of course. You have two hypotheses, means that one is right and one is wrong. But evil is something more emotional. Human beings are divided into two groups. That is to say, the one which has to do with intelligence, which comes from intelligere, understand, and is mostly rational. And then there is the emotions and feelings. That's the other side of it. This is why I talk about evil being fascinating. It's something that attracts you, that appeals to you. You don't know why. And here we have what should quote Dostoevsky, and it is linked. It's linked to a misunderstanding of freedom. I would like to recall a story. Dostoevsky is one of my masters and as a Pirandello. Now, at a certain point, in the Karamazov brothers, there is Ivan. Ivan is the one who wishes to do things. He's not like another brother who's more religious and monk-like. And then, at a certain point, he explains that real freedom is killing someone who has done nothing to you. And in fact, you don't even know him or her. There's one of the brothers, Smerdyakov, who is the weakest mentally, and he understands all of this. He says, right. So what does he do? He gets onto a train. It's a beautiful chapter there. In those days, trains, the third class had compartments, and then there was the door there to go in and out. And so he has someone who doesn't know who this person is. This person has done absolutely nothing to him, and he understands that the greatest freedom is not saying good morning, but he takes him, opens the door, and throws him down. Now, this is possibly the example of evil, which in literature, but also in our life expression, is true to evil, because evil is to do things that are of no use, but which make it possible for you to exist. So, to assert yourself, if we fail to understand the principles of respect, the ones which I call the prime ones, and this is the other part of the book, and we were talking about it. On the other hand, as well of destructiveness, I observe that the principles that our civilization is based on are no longer respected. For example, I would like to read a few points. For example, respect life, your life and the life of others, but respect yours too. The fact that human beings need others. I need my mad patients. I don't know if I have done useful things to them. You'd have to ask them. But I have had a very deep relationship with them. I've received a lot from them, as you know. I've got to say this. My wife tells me, I used to say, after so many years, I can say at long last that I am half of a psychiatrist and half a mad person, but my wife says I mustn't say that, so I won't say it. But so I've received from them. One human being needs another. This is a principle. The idea of a limit. You need limitations. The human condition is limited because we don't know why we become someone, why we die, why we have pain, because there is pain that could be avoided. But there, for example, when you lose someone, a loss, all this has to be decided. In fact, think of the powerful. People who think they're important because they have a lot of money. For example, I read some data on the very rich. But even our rich in Italy don't really appear to be that rich if compared, for example, to the new rich in other countries like China. The principle of symmetry. Symmetry is not only maths, or physics. No. What I do to you, I can receive from you. It is a behavioral rule. If someone loves me, I wish to do something good for them. It's not as if I said, you must love me, but I don't love you. This is particularly true in gendered relationships. Well, why do I have to say, you love me, but I can do what I want? That's wrong. There's a principle of symmetry. So I'm reading them here. The principle respecting freedom. That we are frail. I am frail. This doesn't mean weak, but frail means that my condition is such that I need others. Love, for instance, what is it? Two types of frailnesses that go together, and together they live in a better manner, or they're happier. Where are these principles? Can you see them being developed in society? But on these principles, when you talk about them, I have a question which is probably very personal and delicate. You anchor these principles do you anchor them to a faith, or are they non-religious? No, these are non-religious, but amongst the principles, there's also the respect for transcendence. No, these are the principles of humanism. Humanism is that series of principles, not laws, but principles, that would enable a community to live well. Plato spoke about them, and in fact, there's also the respect for the gods. Why? What are the gods? Well, it means that there's a mystery there, and the gods are part of this mystery, which is not the lack of scientific results. Science has mystery, but it's a different thing. Mystery is not a question, it's an answer. So this is something which I draw from humanism, from human beings, and I believe in human beings. And when I talk, as I'm talking here, I suffer because human beings are stupidus, so we could be something else. We are able to offer examples of extraordinary generosity. So what can we do to be able to draw out this potential to be with others, to state our principles, to enact them? And I believe in that, in the ability of human beings. But I'm worried just now, and but here, there's also something that we could ask you as a psychiatrist, because one of the relatively recent discoveries, and Giacomo Rizzolatti spoke about it, is that of the mirror neurons, Homo sapiens. I won't say sapiens sapiens because we're not worthy of the second sapiens, but as if we were predisposed to mirror our empathy in others and to mirror it, to guess the expectations of others. Maybe psychiatrists can do something by working on empathy and rebalance these ethical principles. Yes, but, Dr. Bianucci, and individually, I will say it's not only possible, but it's what we do, although we have done things, but psychiatry is a scientific discipline. You can no longer talk about psychiatry of being a quasi-science. It's a complex science because it takes human beings into consideration, while physics, say, is involved in a particle studying. Well, we can't be reductionist when you talk about human beings, while you can do it in physics, in chemistry. It's a science de l'homme, of human beings as such. This is possible. It is possible to do it with a human being. And with this, it is possible to reawaken the neurons Rizzolatti was talking about. When we go close to someone else, we switch on mental structures that are there to welcome the other than self. So approaching someone else is someone biological, but it's a great discovery. But excuse me, when a child is born, has an instinct to, in fact, to feed from his or her mother's breast rather than bottles. I've always suggested, I said, why don't you have bottles in the shape of a breast? Because those bottles are not such a maternal symbol, more a paternal symbol. But people have never listened to me, and so baby bottles look rather male. Well, there's a tendency. We need the other. Here in Turin, I'd like to tell you something. I'm old, and I must say that one of the hallmarks, extraordinary advantages of being old, is that you can complain. Lamentation, wonderful. Sometimes I start in the morning, and I quote Jeremiah, complaining, lamentations. It means that you need things, you need people. And it's very human. I'm not ashamed of it. So the problem is that a psychiatrist can work with an individual, but it is the overall system that is no longer based on these aspects that I have called or defined the prime principles. You won't believe me, but the only thing that counts in a group is power, is the person who decides. It is the key element that it's money that puts us together. Identity is no longer, say, if two people meet, I hope this doesn't happen, but we don't. Are you interested in what the other person is doing or not, or are you only interested in money? But in a group, the problem is immediately a distinction. Who's this? Who am I? If this is I am above, I'm below. What size car has he got? These are the values. This is part of the social dynamics and some anomalies that I will not call principles but faults, that are not the ones which work when I relate to a person individually, where I can speak about love, I can talk about, well, I can, for example, someone who's afraid, I can say that I too have been afraid. In that case, what counts is different. You show yourself, while in a group you show power. And don't think that it is this only happens amongst big powers. So you have, even amongst small groups, there's hierarchies, there's the best and the worst. This is a terrible tendency, and it is true of all organizations. And even within a family, this is true. We still discuss, well, if the woman earns money, she's treated differently than a woman who doesn't. For example, the definition is head of the family. Do you need a head in a family? It's like the head of a herd. The difference is very ancient, in fact. The patrimonium, the patrimony, it comes from pater, matrimonium, which is marriage, which is when you measure them from an economic point of view. Patrimony and matrimony. Tomorrow is March the 8th, International Women's Day, so that's an appropriate comment. Father means power, means that you have money, you have means, while mothers have children and have to work. But I'm sure that I don't want the men of Turin to be angry with me. But there are some principles of individuals, of humanism, that are very beautiful. We shouldn't lose them. It would be a great pity. But, as I said, when you have a group, you say, where do you stand? Which is your side? If you say, I'm on no one's side, they say, well, that's impossible. Or maybe he's on somebody's side but doesn't say it, maybe so we must be careful. So you have to be in the arena where you fight. And society is therefore fight rather than cooperation, which is why it is agony. No, ask me a question. No, I'm always talking. What did you want to say? What I want to say is I'm talking about the agony of civilization, of a civilization. I don't believe in the apocalypse. Human beings will continue to live, but no longer in this civilization. Civilizations come one after the other, but this civilization, and I love it, is in agony. So a lot of civilizations have come and fallen. The Mesopotamian civilizations. Ancient Egypt, wonderful. Greek civilization. So I believe that the loss of the principles that I mentioned, the reasons why, when I meet a person, I should consider them a friend until otherwise proven. How can I live in a city if when I go out, the first person I meet is someone I consider an enemy? So if I don't smile, we're the only animals that smile. Well, although once when I had held a conference and I said that human beings are the only ones who smile because we have to move 16 muscles, lots of muscles, about 40 muscles because the orbitals, yes. So I said this. After the conference, a woman came to me, she said, "Professor, wonderful conference, but I wanted to tell you that my dog laughs." So, no, dogs don't laugh, but my cat does. So it's not true that only human beings. Shall I say that human beings are the ones that laugh more openly? But if you think that this person is an enemy, you're not going to smile at them because you can't trust them. So if you go home, you have to lock yourself in. Well, right, in your active pessimism, as you defined it, what do you think can be done in this situation to change it? We have to rediscover, and I'm going to use an odd term, the economy of goodness. I'm not a philosopher. I see things, I live amongst people, and I understand through the relationships I have, but I don't know how to philosophize. But if we could only understand what smiles and welcoming bring, the fact that you show interest in knowing your neighbors. Do you know that we don't know anything because we don't want to know? So nowadays we have reached the point where we deny the relationship and we focus on a limited number of relationships and we fail to realize that by so doing the these relationships we have are overburdened. Right, family, but you can't be in a family 24 hours a day. There have to be others too. You must have two different seats, two different places. Rizzolatti didn't discover that those neurons work only when you recognize your partner. When you go close to another human being, you react. While we are closing ourselves into very small relations on work, people don't talk at work, especially amongst peers, the peer group. Bosses do everything nowadays because every layer is made up of people who quarrel. The rich are fine today. There's no vertical conflict. There's only horizontal conflict because they leave the poor to fight it out. So this is how we close our beings up. It means that we no longer feel the existential need to express ourselves, to share our stories. This is a society, and you've understood it, this is a society where old people are a problem. Well, that's because you complain. No, because we're a social burden. No, you complain with wife and kids, and then you're also bored with complaining, bored with yourself. But how can there be a society where old people don't count and they're simply a social burden? people have used terms like they should be scrapped. And I would just like to point out that you need a few people to be able to put me on the scrap heap. But having said that, his grandchildren aren't coming, don't want to see their grandparents because you don't know how to use a tablet. Well, then tell them to come without a tablet. Not only, but you know something which I recently discovered with great pain. Nowadays, with the so-called beauty, which is superficial beauty, well, has become important. There are a lot of old people, a group, so to speak, a cluster, and they go and undergo cosmetic surgery because they say there's something there. And because of that, his grandchildren won't kiss him. So to have their grandchildren love them, he has to go to the cosmetic surgeon, otherwise my grandchildren won't kiss me. My grandchildren won't. Do you realize what this is? Is this society? Excuse me, excuse my passion in it. But yes, I do hate him a bit because he's young. Yes, do you hate digital? Do you hate tablets? Do you hate the tablets? I have to say, I'm fascinated by the digital world, and I don't wish to demonize this technology. Think of what it's done in the field of medicine, physics, astrophysics, which you know about. At CERN, I've been told, I have a friend, you know, who's a physicist there. And he says the Higgs boson, there were 2,000 computers working on it with 2,000 engineers and mathematicians sitting in front of them. So you need it. No, you certainly can't demonize them. But there are some applications of these instruments which are particularly dangerous, especially for young people. All technologies depend on the use that you make of them, but I believe that if we take this extraordinary system with digital computers and the networks and so on, I think that we consider them, or the youngsters consider them, virtually as a magic wand, which can give you anything. Well, it's just a machine, to be respected, but it's a machine. But we don't explain this, and so we project something which is not only to solve a problem, we project something magical, as if they could give you everything, and that's when you speak about the digital worlds, and they can create addiction, and this is true. And as far as civilization is concerned, these machines not very respectful of civilization. They do maths, they enable us to do lots of things. This morning I wanted to see the news and bling on it, and I did it. The other day I wanted to read a letter by Einstein. They've opened Einstein's archive, so you go on it and you find exactly what you want. So there are 1,001 uses, but our civilization, Plato's civilization, to quote Plato, is based on one premise, which is doubt. 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 Plato's dialogues are based on doubt. Doubt then suggests if a hypothesis. We have to have a dialogue, not a talk show, because in a talk show you fight. The person one side and I'm the opposite. Dialogues are the ability to analyze doubts through hypotheses, to solve them. What we have in our potics has no doubts. It's yes or no, which is finger up or finger down, which if you think of it is a rather rude gesture. It's a male gesture. I'm not going to explain it in detail. Have you understood it? Is it clear? I'll explain it to you after, because I don't think that you really understand what I'm saying. So what I want to say is that there is no doubt in computers. And also George Boole, who is the founder of the Boolean, yes, you know everything about it. Yes, the Boolean ones, which underlies the computer logic, has it as 0 or 1. 0 or 1. He's more elegant than yes or no, but there's nothing like this. No, it's either yes or no. We're talking about digital things and their fingers. Digital is this is the last joke I'll allow him to make. I know that you won't invite me anymore, but it doesn't matter. Well, what I wanted to say is that the tools, the logic, the digital logic is not the logic of doubt. It's not the logic which our civilization is based on. So I am concerned in the hypothesis, I hope, of in the idea that logic, yes or no, should submerge or shift the rational approach. And the rational approach consists of, first of all, and I'm saying it, but it's ridiculous to say it to you. You know about this. First of all, it is linked to time. Don't know rude gestures. Sorry, time, but this is one. I'm just counting. It is linked to time, cause, effect. Effect comes after the cause. If there is no perception of time, you can't say it. It's real time. While in the digital world, it is the eternal present. And they say that time doesn't exist and you can't define the present. And then the space. Space and the notion of space means that an object can be here or there. You can't say that in the virtual world. Images can be in any place and they can be turned around. So if a so-called digital native is put in front of a digital video that they can consider wonderful because you can press a button and an extraordinary world appears, well, this means that this world is more appealing and they will love this world more than the actual world. What is the great advantage, so to speak? That if something of the video world is unpleasant to the person, they click it and they eliminate it. If you go home and you don't like your grandmother, you cannot really click and eliminate her. Well, luckily, there is one way of getting rid of your grandmother, but you wouldn't go into that. So I know this. I don't wish to demonize this, but I am used to this because I'm a doctor and a psychiatrist. I describe dangers. If you go to a cardiologist and you go because you say have a problem with your atrium, it's not that the cardiologist says that your ventricles are absolutely outstanding, wonderful, beautiful, but you've got an atrium that has to be thrown away. You can't throw it away. I'm not used to saying what the problem is. I am going to just talk about the dangers. The physicists who work at CERN will say something different, because that is where the internet started. Of course, the internet is wonderful, but I am a doctor, a psychiatrist, and I am going to talk about the potential dangers. I am concerned because the thoughts, our thinking, the sequence of thoughts, this wonderful computer we have in our heads, this one works in a different way from tablets, from machines. So I am concerned that this machine the tablet must be something that helps our brain, but I am worried about the fact that tablet says so, and therefore your brain doesn't count. And we no longer think, or at least this is a risk. And this brain of ours, this wonderful brain of ours that we know so little of, this brain generates thought. It's a wonderful thing. It's creative. If you have a word, a thought, there's a word, then you generate thoughts, and with thoughts you generate words and intuitions and things. If this brain of ours is reduced to a sensor, which means that we only receive the visual, because they're nearly all visual, stimuli, because they are as if they were only stimuli. If we transform this, like our brains like this, we will regress, and we will turn our brains into a receptive organ. Full stop. You know that there is the MacLeese pattern, whereby he says that our brain is formed by 3 brains that decay through evolution. And having reached the plastic brain, we're now regressing to a brain that reacts to stimuli, a sensor brain. This is my concern when I say that I don't like social media, because, you know, in social media, it's wonderful, isn't it? But then they say, I like someone who doesn't exist, and they can't stand their father and brother who actually exists. So I am very concerned about our brain being able to think, and that everything is linked to tablets and to smartphones. It really is a cause of concern, because human beings reduced to that is a great loss. And in particular, this is true for young people, because there's an industry. The only industry that is successful is that one. And in fact, now they are making tablets for 2- and 3-year-olds. And it's useless my shouting and saying, at least until 3, you can't give them anything. They need to see human beings to have a human identity. No, there are mothers who are saying, no, because human beings will be different, you can't stop them. And so at 2, they will be giving them, grandparents, don't give them anything. Don't give them anything, this rubbish. And also keep the mole on your skin, don't have it removed. I'm not angry with social media, but you must educate people. You must make it a tool for the brain and not vice versa. There's a whole other side to discuss, and which is the idea of limitation and measure. That is the last part of the book, but unfortunately it's nearly 7. What shall we do, Alberto? I'm going to check. Buy a watch instead of looking the time up on your smartphone.
No, ma mi permetta solo di
Just allow me to quote
è bello, l'uomo senza misura.
the man without a measure, or human beings without a measureless human being is terrible. Measure is important. Nobody mentions measure. This is a society with no measure, starting with the fact, because we don't talk about it anymore, but 60 years ago we were talking about rich and poor people, for instance, so they were measured. Now we don't talk about them anymore. There's no measure. There are people who have difficulty in making ends meet, and there are other people who don't even know where to throw their stuff away. So the measure of things is important. Measure for measure, but also respect. You come back and there's someone who's at home because, say, they've got a cold, or, I don't know, your housewife or house husband. Say hello to them. Not in Turin. Turin is obviously different, but say in Verona, which is my city, they go home and somebody says, "Oh, I've really had a terrible day. What is there for dinner?" Right, what is there for dinner? Maybe the person who's at home cooked. Maybe you should ask them if they too had a bad day. No, we get home and we say, "What a day." Wouldn't it be better than to spend the day in bed? Don't do anything, just stay in bed. And there are children to look after, there are the older people to go and say hello to. No, the old people too now, they say, "I have no time." You know, the son might say, "I haven't got time to come and see you, father. Why don't you just have video conferences?" Parent and children relationship going to be replaced by videos? This is only obviously in Verona, my city, not in Turin.
A Verona questo non...
No, Torino. Io nel frattempo però vorrei, tornando alle parole che possono...
But in the meantime, I have, going back to the words that can evoke worlds, so words and worlds, and I have written down desire. You speak about it when you say the culture of suspect and the culture of the enemy kills the will, the drive, the desire to improve. And the second world is trust, which goes back to the relationship. But you can't say, "Now this is the end of the conference," and then give me food for another conference. Let us see desire, will. It is the ability that each one of us has to imagine oneself to be different tomorrow as opposed to today. How can you desire things in real time with no future? What I mean is that the digital world is a world in real time. Digital is only here and now immediately, which is one of the reasons why you have radical empirism. And empirically radical. If I send you a text message and after a minute you have an answer, I'll call you to say, "Have you received my text message?" But having said this, you need to desire, you need to wish, you need to have a will. How can I imagine the idea that maybe tomorrow I'll be better than I am today? This is a drive to life. So this is what I mean, and it's essential. What about trust? It's the same root as faith in Italian, fede, fiducia. But if you trust, if you have faith in human beings, it's wonderful because you know that they're kind with you, that you will be kind to them, and they can help you. And sometimes another key word of this glossary There's these words that will help us emerge from the crisis of this civilization, which I hope will be successful in changing. We need another word. We need the word to give. You know, to pardon is, in Italian and Latin, the same root as donate, to give. Perdonare. Justice is important, and I don't think that everything can be pardoned. But when you can, to perdonare, to donate for, to pardon, then that is the gratification not only for those who are pardoned, who are forgiven, but also for those who forgive, who do pardon. Why have we forgotten mental economy? Instead of talking about economy of money, and then we think that all the world depends on money, sometimes people talk about GDP, a bit of a male voice, a male word, GDP. How's your GDP going? Bad. It's a bad GDP.
Però lei mi invita ancora, vero?
Ma certamente, guarda che è successo.
And with this, if you agree, I would like to conclude. I would like to quote a great scientist, Chomsky, who was a great linguist and a scientist, very strongly linked to biology, and he recently published a book that he has called Who Rules the World? Chomsky. Noam Chomsky. He is also part of the older generation because he says it's no longer even possible to talk about the people who own the world, because through these objects they can become the people who rule the human features. For instance, democracy, as has been mentioned. Where is it? Where is democracy? Does it still exist? Have we still got it? Does it exist in a large country that we have always looked up to, where possibly, maybe, an election did not follow the rules of democracy? Chomsky talks about the people who rule humanity, the people who own our head. So allow me, as a psychiatrist, that is to say, who is interested in brains, focused on brains, well, I'm concerned. I'm concerned because it means that a very small instrument of great technology, new technology, can replace our brain, and they will replace this brain that is made out of flesh. Our brain is frail, but it is, I'm not saying more beautiful, but more human. Thank you. Thank you. We would like to thank Vittorino Andreoli, Homo stupidus, and maybe if you're not too much in a hurry, you can sign a few copies and answer a few more questions. But before saying goodbye, I would like to do something. That is to say, I would like to ask Andreoli if we can have a selfie. Piero, yes, please come too, because it's an old phone, so it hasn't, not a good wide angle. But you're not new, because it will be the 100th of today. But not with me, not with me. I started with the ticket controller on the train. Thank you, thank you.